Welcome to Uncle's channel. Thanks for watching today. Let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. Today focus on a game called David Crane's The Rescue of Princess Blobette. And that's a mouthful to say there, especially with like the creator's name of the title. But David Crane is really famous, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But this game itself is actually a sequel to the NES game, A Boy and His Blob. And basically a puzzle platformer where you feed your little blob different jelly beans. The blob transforms, different obstacles that he can overcome. And it's a very creative puzzle platformer. However, at the same time, it is a little bit on the clunky side. So I have to try to figure out, does the creativeness of it outweigh the clunkiness, or does the clunkiness outweigh the creativeness, and try to figure out, is this game worth your time as we go through it? And like I said, I've never played any of the games in the Boy and His Blob series, but my wife, she absolutely adores the NES version. We actually have a complete unboxed copy of it right behind me here on the shelf, and I really need to go through that at some point, just simply because the game means so much to her. But that could be a different topic for a different video. Today we're focusing on purely the Game Boy version, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Now, Boy and His Blob did get moved up a little bit because Jim C9183 requested in one of my earlier videos, if there's a game that you want to see me cover sooner or later, comment the name of that game down below, and just like Boy and His Blob, I'll move it right up on the queue. Now, I always like to start the videos up by looking at the box art for the game first, and the box art for David Crane's The Rescue of Princess Blobette. I'm going to get tired of saying that before this video is over. But the cover itself is not a great representation of the game. It's just simply a photograph of a medieval castle. It looks like maybe Scotland, you know, sort of on the, maybe Ireland, on the little grassland isles. I'm not really sure exactly where the castle is located at. I'm sure it's an actual castle somewhere because it's definitely a real photograph. And the majority of the game does take place inside the castle, but the realism of this picture does not describe the cartoonish, wacky nature of the game itself. The only saving grace here is down at the bottom. It says starring A Boy and His Blob. And so like anyone who was a fan of the NES game, when they saw the Game Boy version or the Game Boy sequel here, they're going to know what they're getting into just simply because of that little blurb down at the bottom. And so overall, I mean, it's a pretty cover, but it's just simply not a good one for the game. And before I forget about it, let's also talk about who David Crane is for a second, because David Crane is actually a really famous developer, and that's why they attach his name to the cover of the game here, because he actually created the original Pitfall back for the arcade, or I'm sorry, for the Atari. And so, like, he's a really well-known developer for this time period, so they're like trying to cash in on, hey, you remember that game Pitfall? Also right here, a game is going to be quality and worth your time. And there are some similarities as far as like the gameplay goes, as far as like, you know, some of the jumping and the physics. That did remind me a little bit of Pitfall. But let's go and get into the actual game. Now, Rescue of Princess Blobette starts off here with the title screen, just very simple. It says the title of the game, and the background music actually reminds me a little bit of Indiana Jones. And of course, it goes off in its own direction, but at least the first few notes remind me almost directly of Indiana Jones. But then you start the game up and it sort of throws you right into it. Like I said, there's no story, lore, or anything like that behind it. And when you start it up, you have yourself here, your character who you play as the boy, and a little blob behind you. And the blob looks almost more like a little snowball to a degree, almost like an abominable snowball, I guess. And you can basically press one button, the A button, and you can call your blob closer to you if the blob ever journeys away from you. And you can press the B button to basically flip a little jelly bean toward him. And if he eats the jelly bean, he transforms. And you can see down at the bottom of the screen different flavors of jelly bean that you can give your blob. And every flavor does a different thing. The game doesn't tell you like which flavors do which. You sort of have to figure it out on your own. And so like I started the game off here just simply feeding every jelly bean to the blob so I can get like an idea of like which jelly beans do what. And I'm not going to go through the entire list right here because I'll explain them throughout the video. But basically, as you're starting off, you feed your blob your first jelly bean, which can be a tangerine, and then he turns into a trampoline. Sometimes the jelly beans are related to what he transforms into, or it's like a little pun on the transformation. Sometimes they're just like totally random. But if you feed him a tangerine, he does turn into a trampoline. You can bounce up and you can get a little bag of jelly beans up here, and you now have access to more jelly beans, including the lime flavored jelly bean. And when you give him the lime jelly bean, he turns into a key. You can open up the door in front of you. Now, when you go through the door there, you follow this little platform here, and immediately I was like, okay, well, seems pretty easy. And so then I journey off to the left, and I just simply fall like 4 stories down, and it kills my poor little character here. And of course, he respawns back at the top, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do to make my way down this corridor? And so I figure out if you feed your little blob here, if you feed him a vanilla jelly bean, he turns into an umbrella. You can pick it up and you can guide your way or glide your way down a little corridor. But that's not really exactly how it works, because if you don't fall exactly right and you jump a little bit too far or walk off the edge a little bit too fast, at that point you fall or glide your way on your umbrella down like a little flame or a little torch here, and you die that way. Believe it or not, it took me like 4 tries just simply to get down the little corridor here, getting my timing right with the umbrella and not falling to my death or not burning up on the torch along the way down. Now, when you get down to the bottom of it here, you have a almost like a medieval throne room to a degree. Like I said, you're in a castle, so it makes sense. You have like little knights, you have like little throne chairs, you have like little medieval chandeliers up at the top. And I journey through here, and I don't really see anywhere to go. There's some like crystals you can collect for like points and whatnot. They don't actually do anything. The whole goal here is just simply to find Princess Blobette. All the little collectibles like coins and crystals, they mean nothing in the game. The only goal here is simply to collect sacks of jelly beans and find the princess. And so I journey through here, and I'm like, well, I have no idea where to go, what to do. I end up trying to collect some of the crystals, end up hitting another little flame, die off, have a game over. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just start back at the beginning and journey in the opposite direction and not worry about the throne room just yet. So I start back up at the top here. I journey off to the right this time. I do fall to my death a couple times along the way down because I was just jumping a little bit too fast. And you are on the top of the castle here. You can see like little castle walls. And I find my way all the way to the far right. Looks like a dead end. But I feed my little blob a little, tangerine jelly bean. I hop on like a trampoline. I go flying way up to the top here. And I bounce it's like 5 stories up. And finally, all the way up at the top, if I go over to the right a little bit, I actually get my first view here of Princess Blobette. And she is, of course, in her little cage at the top. And that's where we're going to try to rescue her. But then when I journeyed off to the right a little bit, I fell like 5 stories all the way to my death again. I died a lot in this game. And once you die 5 times, you do have a game over. You have to start back at the beginning. But that's not like a huge deal because once you know the path to go on, it's pretty easy to replicate the path and sort of, cut corners of where you need to. And so eventually, though, I figure out when I picked up a sack of jelly beans in this general area going off to the right, it gave me a few new jelly beans to work with. It gave me the mint, which is like an iced jelly bean. We'll use that later on in the game. A banana, which is a monkey wrench, which has one particular purpose. And then something called punch, which is I assume fruit punch you drink, and it creates a hole in the ground. And I try all these jelly beans out. I try a little hole out in the castle walls here. Does seemingly nothing. And so I don't really know where to go at this point. So I journey back over to the left. I go to the throne room again. I try to put a hole on this little suspicious looking part of the ground. Leads to nothing. And I'm just at a loss. And so finally I had to look it up. And where do I go in this game based upon the beans that I have? And it turns out in the first part of the throne room area, you just simply have to lay a hole down. No clue at all that you're supposed to put a hole down there. And when you put a hole down in the ground, you can fall through it and you're in your next advancement part of the castle. How you would figure that out, I don't really know, except to just sort of throw holes out everywhere in the level and hope that you finally find the right one. It's I think it's a little convoluted right there. Let me know in the comments down below if you figured it out on your own, but I had a lot of trouble figuring out where to put the hole in order to fall down, or figure out just to put a hole in general. Once you fall down here, you're now on another level of the castle with, of course, more puzzles to figure out based upon the jelly beans you feed your blob. And the first puzzle you're going to come across a little mash machine. I don't really know what this would be, little plungers that are coming down. And if you run too fast, you run into it, and it of course squishes you. And also, if you run a little bit fast and you get close to it, when your blob runs up next to you, sometimes the blob runs into you, and it is really annoying. He pushes you forward, and when he pushes you forward, you go under the machine, and of course it squishes you that way. So many times in this game, I'm timing my platforms just right where I want to stand, and the blob just comes flying out of nowhere, hits me, knocks me off on the edge, knocks me into the machine here. And I would say a solid half of the times that I die here occur from the blob just simply running into me and knocking me into the hazard. And so that's really, really obnoxious. You have something you have to watch out for in the game. I don't know if it's the same in the NES game or not, but the mechanics definitely could have been improved as far as how the blob reacts to you when you're close to an edge like this. But anyway, you turn your blob into a ladder here of a licorice jelly bean. You climb the ladder up here, and then at that point you turn your blob into a coconut. And to turn him into a coconut, you actually feed him a coconut jelly bean. That one should be pretty obvious. You pick up the coconut, throw it, hits the little switch here, turns off, and now you can go back down. You can go below all the little plungers that were trying to squish you. And then on the next screen, you come across another machine here that you need to go over the top of it, but there's little obstacles that are trying to kill you on the top of that. And so you have to take out a jelly bean called banana, and it turns your blob into a monkey wrench. You get it because it's a banana and a monkey. I mean, the puns are, they're okay, I guess, for the game. It turns into a monkey wrench. You can throw it into the machine, and it jams it up. However, it took me probably 5 tries to actually get him to turn into or be able to throw the monkey wrench far enough in there, because when you throw it, you have to stand way back in order to throw it in there. If you just sort of barely throw it in there, it doesn't work. And so I was actually sort of puzzled at first, thinking I was maybe doing the wrong action here, but it is indeed throwing the monkey wrench in there in order to get it to work. Turn a trampoline, hop across it, go on to the next screen, and on the next screen you have a little wall here that you need to get lifted up, and there's a little hole in the ceiling part of the machine, and you need to turn your jelly bean into a jack. And so in order to do that, you have to feed him an apple, turns into an apple jack. And so at that point, he of course knocks a little jack up into the ceiling, and it lifts the door up. But this is another part where it's a little bit clunky, because if the blob is like not directly under that hole, it will not go up in the appropriate area. And it is very difficult to like get the blob exactly where you want him to be. When you call him over to you, sometimes he comes on top of it, pushes you out of the way. Sometimes he stops a little bit early. It's always like a little bit different area where the blob stops. And so like it's actually hard to time him to get him exactly where you want to be. It probably took me a solid 2 or 3 minutes just simply to get him exactly where I wanted him. Even though I knew how to solve the puzzle, the game mechanics were not working with me to the best of its ability. Now on the next screen, I come across a little elevator going down, and just like I mentioned earlier, I get to the edge of it, my blob comes running across the corner of the screen, knocks me right off in the hole, and I fall to my death. The number of times I die is just ridiculous here from the blob. But basically what you do here is you just simply ride the elevators down, avoiding the little flamethrowers that are shooting flames out at you. You get down to the bottom, sort of jump off to the left or to the right, and then you feed your blob a cola, which turns him into a little bubble. And then you can get inside that bubble, and you can get into the water, and you can explore underwater inside your bubble here. Now you can go off to the left, you can go off to the right, and off to the right there's some little jellyfish and whatnot as far as like enemies. I wanted to pick the jellyfish because of like the jelly bean, or at least keep like the name of jelly in there instead of like a regular fish. I don't know, I feel like the game is punny enough to want to do jellyfish for that particular reason. But at this point, you journey off to the right, you can get out of the water, and you start trampolining your way up to the top. And when you get up to the top here, you're going to encounter one of the other enemies in the game. There are not very many enemies, really just a jellyfish and this particular enemy. It's like a fire caterpillar bouncing back and forth. And at this point, you feed your blob a strawberry, which turns him into a bridge for some reason. I don't understand that pun. If you do, you can let me know in the comments down below. But a strawberry turns him into a bridge. You can journey off to the right, go underneath the little bouncing caterpillar here. And on the next screen here, there is a little lever. And once you flip the lever, it basically turns the direction of the elevator. Instead of the platforms coming down, the platforms are now going to go up. And so now you can journey further up into the tower. And so we work our way back over to the elevator. And if you want to continue the underwater adventure off to the right, there are different like treasure chests and different points you can get from that direction. But as far as I can tell, points don't matter at all in the game. And so that's pretty much optional content if you want to go that way. But you just simply hop on a little elevator here, ride your way up to the top, journey off to the right. And when you journey off to the right, you're going to continue in that direction until you come across like a little boiling pot of water. And all you have to do is take a little mint jelly bean and throw that jelly bean into the pot here, and it ices it over. And so that's the point of the mint jelly bean. You can also feed a mint jelly bean to the blob if you wanted to. It turns like into a little ice cube, and you can like skate on that. But I don't think that's like a actual effective point in the game at all. The mint is only used for the pot here. But once you've iced over the pot, you get the blob on top of the pot, and you feed him a trampoline jelly bean, and you go flying way up into the sky. It takes several bounces to get this high up. And when you get all the way to the top, you journey off to the little left-hand platform, and you're standing right beside Princess Blobette in her little cage here. And now you throw a honey jelly bean down off the platform, and it goes all the way down to the bottom, and your blob will eat it, and a honey jelly bean turns him into a little bee here. Get a honey bee, honey jelly bean. He flies up to the top, to be with you, gets up there, hovers underneath the cage, opens up the bottom of it, and Princess Blobette falls all the way down, and she journeys off back further into the level, into the throne room, because she's the princess. She's going back to her throne. And so now we basically have to take the umbrella out. We float all the way back down the little tower here. We journey our way back over to the throne room, and once we get there, our blob, Mr. Blob, is going to take his spot right next to Princess Blobette, and they have like little hearts going back and forth. They're happy to be reunited. And at that point, it says the end. We've won the game, or maybe it says you win. Whichever, it says we've finished the game up. There are no credits to roll because the credits technically rolled after the title screen earlier in the game. But this is the end of the game, and you get the same little song here, victory music, which is going to be the same as the title screen music. There are only 2 songs in the entire game. There's the overworld or the castle theme, which is going to get on your nerves pretty intensely as you go. But then there's also the opening and closing song, which are the same. They probably could have ventured out and done a little bit more with the soundtrack, but they just chose not to, I guess. But let's talk about the game as an overall. The game probably took me like 2 hours to finish, and I really feel like if I knew like what the jelly beans did ahead of time, or like sort of knew the directions a little bit, or like a little bit better idea of how to play the game, you could probably finish this in maybe like 20-ish minutes, maybe a little bit less, because there's a lot of optional content that you can avoid if you know the direction to go on. But at the same time, like the game itself is a pretty clever little puzzle game. I like the idea of feeding your blob different jelly beans to get him to transform, to solve different puzzles. Some of the the puzzles could be a little more intensive, or like you could have used the jelly beans more often, because it felt like you were constantly using the trampoline jelly bean, but like other jelly beans you use like one time, like the monkey wrench or like the lime or like the coconut. Those were all like one-time jelly beans, or like the ice. And so like it felt like you could really have expanded the gameplay quite a bit, and it may be expanded on the NES version, I don't know, but on the Game Boy version, most jelly beans were used for one occasion, and that was all. The game is also a little bit on the clunky side as far as like, you know, getting your positioning just right for the blob to do his different actions. Sometimes the blob like pushing you off of different edges when you didn't want him to, especially like the elevator part here. Like, man, I tried the elevator part so many times because like I would transform the blob back from being whichever form he was in to being a blob, and he would just sort of knock me right off the edge, and I would die that way by drowning in the water. And so like there were so many times in the game where I was like, if the game was just not quite as clunky, the game would be way more fun, because I'm like just dying and getting frustrated based upon bad mechanics in the game. And so like I really feel like if they fixed that, the game could have been significantly better, and I feel like you could actually enjoy your experience quite a bit more. But for a quick little puzzle platforming game, I feel like it definitely had its charm, it definitely had its creative aspects, and I don't really feel like the clunkiness like completely negated the positives of the game. But at the same time, I don't really feel like the positives, you know, completely negated or canceled out the clunkiness. So I'm going to give the game a straightforward 5 out of 10. I feel like it could have definitely been better, and it could have definitely also been worse, because it is a very unique game in its own rights. And I am anxious to go back and play the NES version finally, because I feel like a lot of the complaints in this game might be corrected in the NES game. And you can let me know in the comments down below, is the NES way better than this one? Is this one better than NES? Let me know the overall thoughts about this game. But like I said, 5 out of 10, you can probably finish it in less than 2 hours if you're really good at the game, maybe like 20 minutes. But overall, a pretty middle of the road game for the Game Boy. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above. And as always, go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.